He raised his glass, laughed, and let the poison drip from his tongue so casually it almost felt rehearsed. "You've always been the family's pathetic charity case, haven't you?" His voice rang through the party like a slap, echoing against polished marble and shimmering crystal. 100 curious eyes landed on me, waiting for my collapse. But I didn't collapse. I stood there, steady, as his words sliced through every layer of my dignity. "My name is Elena, and from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Have you ever stood in a room full of people who claim to love you, only to feel like a ghost among them?" The music stuttered, the waiters froze mid-step, and I swear I heard my own heart break clean in two. Plates were stacked with shrimp and steak, laughter buzzed in low, uneasy circles. Yet the moment he spat those words, the whole night changed. My sister, Marissa, glanced away like she hadn't heard, like she hadn't seen her own husband gut me with a smirk. I wiped my palms on my dress, swallowing a surge of bile. I wanted to scream that I had paid for this entire party, every glass of champagne, every rented string of fairy lights, every ridiculous bouquet. But what was the point? The people around me had already decided who I was, a leftover, a liability, a joke in a fancy dress. His voice rose again, loud enough to crush me. "If you can't even keep a man, at least keep your mouth shut while I'm paying your sister's bills." They laughed. They actually laughed. I caught my sister's eye, searching for any flicker of protection, of love, of loyalty. But her eyes were blank, like glass. My own sister. So I smiled. It was a kind of smile that stings your own lips, the kind that tastes of salt and rage. Then I did what no one expected. I paid the bill. Quietly, I signed the check for the entire humiliating spectacle. I watched the smug smile fade from his face as he realized I had been the one footing the tab, the one who'd made this whole illusion of wealth possible. I let them finish their cheap laughs. I let them scrape up the crumbs of their own pride while they sipped wine from glasses I'd paid for. I let them believe they had won. Then I stood, calm as a blade, and without a word, no tear, no scream, no plea, I turned and walked out of that glittering cage, leaving behind the stink of their smallness. Outside, the night air was sharp enough to carve new thoughts into my mind. Every step away from that party was a step toward my own resurrection. If they thought I was the family charity case, they were about to learn exactly whose money propped up their entire illusion. My phone buzzed in my purse, but I ignored it. I could already imagine Marissa trying to calm him down, trying to control the damage. But the damage was already done. They had shown me who they really were. I would burn down every single lie they had built around me. They had no idea I was the reason their lights stayed on, their mortgages stayed paid, their shopping sprees went unchecked. I could end it all with the stroke of a pen. And I would. As I reached my car, I looked back once at the windows glowing with laughter. A house of cards. I could see it trembling already. The night was cold on my skin, but something inside me burned with a terrible, beautiful fire. They thought they'd humiliated me. They had no clue. The storm was coming, and I was going to be the one to pull every string until their perfect lives unraveled like cheap thread. The world would remember me. I didn't sleep that night. My body lay on the bed, but my mind was a hive of fury, buzzing, alive. I could still hear the party's music bleeding through my bones, that filthy laugh twisting around my heart like a noose. His voice, "If you can't even keep a man," repeated in my ears until I wanted to tear them off. It's strange, isn't it, how humiliation can flip a switch you didn't know existed. At dawn, I rose, pulled on jeans, a black sweater, tied my hair back so tight my scalp ached. Because today wasn't about looking pretty. Today was about taking back everything they had stolen from me. I made coffee but couldn't taste it. My stomach churned, hungry for revenge more than food. My phone was a graveyard of missed calls, Marissa, a dozen times. I didn't answer. I refused to let her stain me with another apology that would mean nothing, because she'd always choose him. Always. Instead, I opened my laptop. I scrolled through the bank accounts, my bank accounts, that had propped up their lives. I paid for their mortgage, their Lexus, their kitchen remodel, their vacations, because I'd love my sister enough to let her build the illusion of a perfect marriage. Not anymore. Line by line, I cut them off. I cancelled the monthly payments on their utilities. I revoked the automatic transfers that paid off their credit cards. I withdrew the preloaded gift cards my sister depended on for her grocery bills. With every click, I felt lighter, like shedding a skin that had rotted around me. By the time the sun clawed fully above the skyline, I had untied every single knot they'd wrapped me in. I wasn't their bank anymore. And God help them. They were about to discover what their lives looked like without me holding up the walls. My phone vibrated again, a text this time. Elena, please pick up. Please. He's furious. The mortgage bounced. I almost laughed. I typed back 2 words. Figure it out. And then I turned off my phone completely. No more lifelines. I left my house with my head high, keys in hand, a plan burning through my veins like wildfire. There was one last step. One move left to rip out their hearts the way they had tried to rip out mine. My sister had begged me for months to invest in her husband's side business, some luxury rental property scheme he couldn't run to save his life. Out of sisterly love, I'd agreed. I'd signed the papers, made the down payment in my name, trusted them because that's what family was supposed to mean. That property was the crown jewel of his fragile ego, the symbol he waved around to prove he was a big man. I had the paperwork in my safe, the deed, the ownership, all in my name, and I was going to take it back. I pulled into the attorney's office, stepped out, boots hitting the ground like a war drum. The receptionist looked up with wide eyes. No appointment, no pleasantries, just me, radiating purpose. I need to transfer ownership, I said, voice steady. Today. She blinked, then nodded, pulling out the forms. As the pen moved in my hand, I felt something close to peace for the first time in years. It was done. Everything he thought he owned, everything he thought he controlled, belonged to me, legally, permanently, without question. He'd humiliated me in front of 100 people. I'd destroy him in front of the entire world. When I stepped back into the sunlight, I let it hit my face, let it wash me clean. My tears had dried. My rage had not. And if they thought they'd seen the worst of me that night at the party, they hadn't seen anything yet. I was just getting started. They say silence is golden, but mine was a blade. By the next day, their frantic messages stacked up like dying prayers. I scrolled through them on my Bona phone, the only number I kept on, and felt nothing but an icy calm. Elena, please. The bank called. They are freezing the account. Elena, I'm begging you. The car payment bounced. Answer me, or I swear he'll leave me. Leave her, I thought. How convenient. Because he was about to lose a lot more than a marriage. Have you ever watched someone drown in the very water they once forced you to drink? I went to work that morning, same as always, as if the world hadn't tilted. As if I hadn't burned every bridge they'd built on my back. Colleagues smiled at me, nodded. No clue that the woman behind the calm face was a loaded weapon. In my office, I closed the door and opened the file cabinet. My private revenge plan was neatly labeled, every receipt, every deed, every text they'd ever sent begging for money. Proof stacked like ammunition. I had carried them for years. Time to show the world exactly what that looked like. A quick call to my lawyer, a sharp tone. It's time. Serve him. I could picture the scene, my brother-in-law in his flashy little rental office, thinking he was a king, when a courier would show up with a thick stack of legal filings. Foreclosure, asset seizure, eviction notices, all the things he'd laughed about behind my back, joking that I was too soft to ever pull the trigger. Guess what, sweetheart? I wasn't soft anymore. I looked out the window, the city moving like clockwork beneath me, and wondered if anyone else felt this powerful, this free. By noon, my sister was outside my building. She stood there in tears, makeup streaked, hair a mess, clutching a cheap purse I'd probably paid for. I almost felt pity. Almost. But then I remembered the silence in her eyes that night when he tore me apart. I went down, met her on the sidewalk, where the cold bit through both of us. "Elena," she sobbed, "you're destroying us." I tilted my head, studying her like a stranger. "No," I said. "I'm showing you who destroyed me." She grabbed my sleeve like a drowning child, but I pulled free. "He can't survive this," she choked out. "He's losing everything." I met her gaze, steady as stone. "So did I whispered. "That night. In front of everyone." Her lips trembled, but she couldn't argue, couldn't deny it. I turned away. "Fix your own life, Marissa," I said. "I'm done carrying it." And I meant every syllable. As I walked away, I heard her collapse onto the bench, sobbing into her hands. Maybe she thought tears would wash away the stains of betrayal, but mine hadn't. My steps felt lighter than they had in years. I had cut the cord. By sunset, my lawyer called. "It's done," he confirmed. "All assets reclaimed. Their accounts are frozen. The property is yours alone. The eviction order will land in his mailbox by tomorrow." I almost smiled. Almost. I stood by my window that night, lights of the city blinking like stars, and let the darkness settle. They thought I was their weakness, the sad little sister too soft to fight. But I was their reckoning. A single woman, underestimated, invisible until she chose to burn. And in the ruins I would leave behind, maybe they would finally see me. Maybe they would finally understand the price of turning a woman into a weapon. Because this was only the beginning. And God help them, I wasn't finished yet. Morning arrived, cold and bright, like a harsh truth. I stood in front of my mirror, pulling on a clean blazer, smoothing every wrinkle until I looked unshakable. Because I was. The woman in the glass was no longer the quiet benefactor, the soft sister, the background character. She was a force. Have you ever tasted power for the first time and realized you could never go back? I sipped black coffee, scrolling the news feeds. There it was, barely 12 hours after my lawyer's final blow. Local investor faces foreclosure as luxury property deal collapses. His name was there, bold as a bruise. Headlines crawled across finance pages. Bloggers gobbled it up. The mighty businessman stripped to the bone, his dirty secrets splashed for all to see. And the delicious irony, I had funded his rise and orchestrated his ruin. I forwarded the article to Marissa. No caption, just the link. Let her feel the way I had felt at that party, exposed, raw, powerless. No answer. I closed my phone and drove. Today was not for them. Today was for me. I had an appointment downtown, a tiny office space with a creaky sign reading K&L Consulting, a woman-run startup that helped victims of financial abuse rebuild their lives. I'd funded them in secret for years, but today, I walked in head held high, no longer anonymous. The director, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, jumped to her feet. "Elena, we didn't know you'd come in person." I smiled. For the first time in so long, the smile felt real. "I want to set up a scholarship fund," I told her, calm and measured. "For women like me, women who were told they were worthless." Her hands fluttered to her mouth, grateful tears brimming. "That's incredible." I nodded. I felt incredible. While my sister's husband choked on the ashes of his fake empire, I would build something that mattered, something that grew beyond the scars they'd left on me. The paperwork took hours, but I signed every line with a steady hand. $100,000. Cash. My money, my terms, my legacy. They tried to reduce me to nothing, but here I was, giving life back to other women who would never have to kneel the way I had. When I left, the air seemed to taste sweeter, like possibility. My phone buzzed again. This time, I answered. Marissa's voice cracked like glass. "You ruined him." I stepped away from the street noise, voice even. "No, Marissa," I said. "He ruined himself. I just stopped paying for his illusions." There was a long silence, a broken whimper on the other end. "Can we Fix this, she finally pleaded. I thought of that night, the crowd laughing while she looked away. I thought of how her loyalty had a price tag I'd always paid. No, I breathed. We're past fixing. She started to cry, but I ended the call, sliding the phone into my pocket like closing a book I'd already read too many times. As I crossed the street, a chill wind whipped through my hair, but I felt warmer than ever. Their world had always depended on me staying small, but I wasn't small anymore. I was the architect of their destruction and the designer of my own rebirth. That night, I poured myself a glass of cheap red wine and stood on my apartment balcony, watching the city move. I toasted the night sky, alone and utterly free. To me, to the woman who rose from the ashes and decided to turn every heartbreak into a weapon. And as I sipped, I felt a calm settle in my bones, a quiet promise that tomorrow I would go even further, because nothing was going to stop me now. The world would learn exactly who Elena was. By the next morning, the sharks had started to circle. Lawyers, debt collectors, former business partners, all pounding on his gilded door, demanding money that no longer existed. I could almost taste the panic in his frantic voicemails, each one like a gift I unwrapped slowly, savoring the sound of a man cracking under the weight of his own pride. Have you ever watched a predator realize he was just prey in someone else's story? My phone rang. Private number. I picked up. Elena. His voice was shredded, raw with fury. You think you can do this to me? You think you can just walk away after destroying everything? I stepped into my kitchen, poured coffee with the calm of a surgeon. I didn't destroy anything, I said softly. I simply took back what was mine. He laughed, a horrible, broken laugh. I'll rebuild. You think you've beaten me? I'll rebuild it all. I sipped my coffee, unbothered. Then do it, I replied. On your own dime this time. He fell silent, breathing hard, and for a split second I felt a chill, not fear, but a deep satisfaction, because I could hear it the moment he realized the world wouldn't bend for him anymore. You're a vengeful bitch, he spat. My lips curled. I learned from the best, I answered, voice like ice. I hung up. The phone stayed silent after that. For the rest of the day, I handled the fallout like a CEO cleaning house. I signed off on final asset transfers, collected keys, arranged for the auction of the luxury vehicles still sitting in his name, but paid with my cash. I even called the bank to personally approve the foreclosure. The clerk on the line was apologetic, almost embarrassed. Ms. Carter, I'm sorry it has to come to this. I smiled, letting him hear my triumph. I'm not. When I arrived to inspect the seized rental property, the locks had already been changed. The front door hung open like a wound. Inside, everything smelled stale and dead. All that overpriced marble and velvet, now worthless, silent. I walked through each room, remembering how he'd boasted about the granite countertops, the imported fixtures, and I laughed. I laughed so hard I had to brace myself against the kitchen island, because none of it mattered anymore. I owned it. He would never walk these halls again. On my way out, I left the keys with a young property manager who looked nervous. List it, I told him. I want it sold before the month is out. He nodded, awed by my certainty. As I stepped back into the sunlight, the weight slid off my shoulders like an old coat. Marissa texted me again that night. His leaving me. You ruined our lives. Please, Elena, I have nowhere to go. I read it twice, letting the heartbreak wash over me, then fade. There was no redemption in her voice, only fear of losing her comforts. I answered simply, not my problem anymore. That was the final severing, the last frayed thread cut clean. For the first time in my adult life, I felt untethered, unbound. I poured a glass of bourbon, breathing in the bane, and raised it to the ceiling as if to toast every woman who had ever been broken down and dared to rebuild. They'd tried to make me their cautionary tale. Instead, I'd become their worst nightmare, a woman with nothing left to lose and everything to gain. And tomorrow, I'd start building a future so magnificent they'd choke on its brilliance. Because this story wasn't just about revenge. It was about rising. And I was only halfway through. I woke up to silence. No vibrating phone. No panic messages. No pleading. The peace felt foreign, like a new language on my tongue. I stretched under the sheets, letting the sun warm my face, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I owed anyone anything. Have you ever tasted freedom so sharp it almost cut you? I dressed slowly, pulling on jeans and a soft linen blouse. No armor today. I didn't need it anymore. The war was nearly over. At my kitchen table, I scrolled through my inbox. One message caught my eye, a reply from a foundation I'd been supporting for years. Ms. Carter, thank you for your incredible gift. With your help, we can rescue another 20 women from financial violence this year. We're naming the new program after you. My throat tightened. Elena, a name I'd thought meant nothing for so long, now printed in bold letters to stand for survival, for rising, for refusing to bow. I closed my eyes, breathing in that quiet pride. They'd tried to break me, but my name was going to help heal someone else. A knock at my door startled me. When I opened it, there he was, my brother-in-law. He looked like a ghost, cheeks hollow, suit wrinkled, eyes bloodshot. Elena, he rasped, you have to fix this. The audacity of it made me laugh, a sound so cold it startled even me. Fix what? I asked sweetly. Our lives. You can't just leave us like this. You can't leave her like this. I leaned against the door frame, arms crossed, steady as stone. You did, I reminded him. You left me to Bain in front of everyone. Remember? His jaw worked, no words coming. I almost pitied him, but then I remembered the echoes of laughter, the wine glasses clinking while my heart shattered. Elena, please, he tried again. I'm finished. I tilted my head. Yes, I agreed. You are. His shoulders slumped, and I saw it, the collapse, the realization that the game was over. I can't get a job. The stories everywhere, he whispered. My own parents won't even answer my calls. I swallowed a lump of grim satisfaction. That's not my problem, I said, calm as ice. I warned you. I begged for your respect. You spat in my face. He stepped closer, the desperation stinging off him like sweat. I'll pay you back, he babbled. Every penny. Just don't leave us like this. I almost laughed again. You don't have pennies, I said softly. His face crumpled. Marissa appeared behind him then, makeup smeared, hair unbrushed, eyes empty. Elena, she begged, we'll do anything. Please don't leave us. The words landed like rotten fruit. I had done everything for them, and they had thrown me to the wolves. I took a step back, closing the door slowly. No, I said. You'll do anything for yourselves now. The lock clicked. The world went silent on the other side of that door, and for once, I didn't flinch. I poured myself a cup of tea, hands steady, heart quiet. I didn't owe them my ruin anymore. Later that night, I lit a single candle on my windowsill, let its small flame stand as proof that even the most battered heart can still burn bright. Tomorrow, I'd go to my lawyer one last time, tie up the final legal threads, and start looking for a new place to live. Not to escape, but to build. Somewhere no one would ever call me Charity again. A place where my name was mine alone. As the candle flickered in the dark, I whispered to no one but the night. I will never be small again. The next morning felt different, like stepping into air that finally belonged to me. I rose before sunrise, pulled on a crisp white shirt, and brushed my hair until it shone like a battle flag. I had one final thing to finish, the last nail in the coffin. Have you ever stood at the end of a war you didn't start, but chose to win anyway? I drove to my lawyer's office, the city still half asleep. My hands didn't shake this time. I walked in, signed the final foreclosure order, and returned the folder with my name printed bold across every page. Elena Carter. They'd remember that name. The lawyer, a kind woman named Meredith, paused before handing me the last receipt. "You really want to go through with this?" she asked, searching my face for weakness. I nodded, steady. "Yes," I said. "No more ties." She smiled, maybe proud, maybe relieved. "Then congratulations," she told me. "It's over." Over. I stepped outside into sunlight so bright it felt like a blessing. A woman free of the strings that had choked her. I wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. I was too clean, too hollowed out, too reborn. As I headed home, I passed the house that used to be theirs, used to be mine, if you counted the checks. It looked so small now. The lawn overgrown, paint chipping, a dying dream. I slowed down just enough to see Marissa on the porch, arms wrapped around her knees, lost and shaking. She saw me. Her eyes burned holes into mine, but I kept driving. There was nothing left to say. I had given her everything, and in return, she handed me shame. Now she could keep it. Back at my apartment, I opened the letter from K&L Consulting. "Your scholarship program begins this fall. You're changing lives, Elena. You should be proud." I folded the letter against my heart, breathing deep. I was proud, not because I'd destroyed him, though good, that had been sweet, but because I had built something bigger than revenge. I had built a future. I packed a small suitcase that night, folding clothes with quiet precision. I was leaving the city, starting fresh somewhere they could never reach me. A place where my name wasn't a weapon, but a monument. I threw out old photos, parties, forced smiles, dinners where I'd sat at the table pretending to be less so they could feel like more. All gone. I kept one picture, me at 16, smiling shyly, a girl who hadn't yet learned that sometimes the worst betrayals come wearing the face of family. I tucked her away in my bag, a reminder of the woman I'd grown from. Tomorrow, I would drive south, find a quiet rental with warm walls and clean air. Somewhere to begin again, with no ghosts, no debts, no chains. As I zipped up my bag, I whispered to the empty room, "Thank you for breaking me." Because without that break, I would never have known how strong I could be. In the silence, I felt a kind of peace that was almost holy. This was the price of freedom, losing what you thought you needed so you could make space for what you truly deserved. I stood at the window one last time, watching the city lights blur, and felt my heart slow, steady, prepared. Tomorrow, I would rise as a new woman, unforgiven, unapologetic, unbound, and they would never see me coming again. I left before dawn, the city still wrapped in its own restless dreams. My car was packed, engine purring, a single suitcase in the trunk holding everything I chose to carry forward. As I pulled away from the curb, I didn't look back. Some things deserve no farewell. Have you ever felt so free that even the air seems to taste different? The highway stretched ahead, open and endless, like a promise. Mile after mile, I felt the poison drain from me. Every lie, every insult, every manipulation they'd ever wrapped around my throat. Gone. Hours later, I arrived in a small coastal town where no one knew my name. The houses were sun-faded, the people unhurried, and the sea smelled like hope. I rented a modest apartment overlooking the water, clean and bright, with no ghosts in the corners. On the first night, I stood barefoot on the balcony, letting the ocean wind wash over me. I could almost feel that party's echo slipping away, the laughter, the smirks, the shame, dissolving into the waves. My phone stayed silent, and I let it. There was nothing left to say to them. Instead, I opened my laptop and pulled up the Foundation's website. The Elena Carter Fund was already enrolling its first scholarship recipients, women with children, women who had escaped cruelty, women who had been told they were worthless, until now. Reading their stories made me cry, but these tears were different. Not grief, not rage. These were tears of triumph, because somehow my pain had become their lifeline. The next morning, I walked to a small cafe down the street. The barista smiled, friendly, no recognition in his eyes. "First time here?" he asked. "Yeah," I breathed. First time anywhere, really. He laughed softly, handed me a cup of coffee with a swirl of foam. Welcome to your new beginning, he said. I sat outside, coffee warming my palms, watching the ocean move with its quiet power. I thought of Marissa, of him, of how they'd thought they could grind me down until I was dust beneath their feet. And I thought of who I was now, a woman forged in betrayal, sharpened by humiliation, reborn through rage, but refusing to stay there, because revenge was never the end. It was just the clearing of a field so I could finally plant something worth growing. I took a sip of coffee, felt it steady my heartbeat, and smiled. Tomorrow, I would meet with a local realtor, maybe buy a little place of my own. A house with white curtains, a garden I could plant herbs in, walls no one else had ever claimed. The money was mine. My future was mine. My name was mine. I had paid for my peace in fire and ashes, and I would never let anyone steal it again. As the sun rose higher, I promised that 16-year-old girl inside me one last thing. No one would ever humiliate her again. No one would ever make her feel small. No one would ever take her voice, her worth, or her name, because I had become my own savior. I finished my coffee, feeling a warmth in my chest that no one could steal. The waves kept rolling, endless and sure, and so would I. One breath, one step, one choice at a time. This was my story now, and no one could rewrite it.